Hey guys, sorry I'm a bit late. I had to get my coffee because, Um, I thought I would talk about something that somebody brought up in one of my Q&As that I didn't address, and while I'm waiting for you guys to join. Hey girl, thank you for joining me. I'm just going to wait for people to join. I was going to talk about, somebody asked the question, and I hope she comes and watches this afterwards. She probably will. But she asked because there's I don't want to say it's a rumor going around, but a lot of people ask the question about gluten. They've been told that gluten and dairy look very similar, and so when you're allergic to gluten, you need to cut out gluten. But there's a lot of things that look similar to gluten, but that doesn't mean they are gluten to your body, and your body is a lot smarter than that, you guys. You got to give your body credit. There's another, a lot of people don't realize, but they don't actually know why people react to gluten. They thought it was the fact that gluten was an inflammatory protein, but now they're thinking more along the lines of it being a trypsin inhibitor, which actually affects your neurotransmitters. Isn't that interesting? So they don't really know the mechanism of action in which gluten affects the body. And so I would really kind of stray away from people telling you like gluten looks, there's a long list of gluten cross reactors, and they'll say like coffee is a gluten cross reactor, or dairy is a gluten cross reactor, all grains are a gluten cross reactor, and all a cross reactor means is that the molecule looks very similar to gluten, but it's not gluten, and your body knows that. So if the bottom line is, if you react to something, don't eat it. But if you don't react to it, don't let someone convince you that you are maybe reacting to something. If you don't see a clear benefit from restricting it from your diet, after 30 days, there's no reason to restrict it from your diet at all. And a lot of people ask me about coffee, and here's the deal with coffee, you guys. If you have low tolerance to caffeine, or all these people that are suddenly getting anxiety when they're drinking coffee, this is quite a new thing. But when you're on a starvation diet, regardless of if you're low carb or low protein, your body cannot work properly when you're metabolizing caffeine. And remember that caffeine is a metabolic encourager, or it's pro-metabolism. And so when you drink caffeine, you need to make sure that your metabolism has the nutrients it needs to function properly. Or guess what? It has to secrete stress hormones in order to break your muscles down to make glucose. So all these people on low carb diets that are like, oh, I can't do caffeine anymore, it makes me have anxiety. I'm like, girl, because you're drinking caffeine on an empty stomach and you're making your cortisol go. My husband takes 2 different high blood pressure meds, and that's all he takes for meds. Do you think it's possible that it could cause fertility issues for him? He's only 30. Yeah, and not necessarily the high blood pressure meds. I always ask what they are. Like sometimes they're just simple potassium. The more harsh ones, yeah, because here's the deal. Again, I'm teaching you guys how to be your own health advocates, and this goes for your family as well. You always want to ask the question, why? Why does he have high blood pressure? A lot of men have high blood pressure because they're low in sodium, or low in potassium, or low in vitamin K2. And then on top of it, they're stressed out, right? So their adrenals are pumping out stress hormones. Men are high stress, and they really push it down, right? They'll push themselves to the very brink. That's why they have a heart attack so young and just die, because they'll just stress themselves out, but they won't say they're stressed. They won't do anything about the stress. They won't take care of themselves. I'm not saying this is true for all men. I'm just saying that this is kind of the norm. And so men are, and this goes for them not being able to express it. Like it's not okay to communicate that you're stressed out, or you're under pressure, or you're not okay, right? That's what we tell men. You can't do that. You can't be a baby, and it ends up hurting them in the long run. So it would be important, I wouldn't worry about the high blood pressure meds necessarily, but I would ask yourself why his blood pressure is high, because there's always a reason why your body's pumping blood through the circulation a lot quicker. How do I know if I should take oregano? Oregano is one of those things where I just have on hand for immunity. I do use it in my gut protocols, but I don't think that somebody should just start a gut protocol without really knowing if they have gut issues, or if they've haven't gotten a comprehensive stool test done. But oregano is just good to have on hand. I think it's really awesome for taking, especially during the winter time, or when cold and flu season is going around. It's also really good if you have sinus issues or just general gut issues. It's very potent for killing those things. I know you say we should only drink when thirsty, but is there a minimum amount of water we should make sure to drink? Well, you have to understand that that's going to depend on what you ate that day. So, for example, I'm drinking a cup of coffee right now that is made from water. I just ate some strawberries and some oranges and some Greek yogurt, and those all have water in them. I'm probably going to have some papaya later. That's really rich in water. And so I'm not going to worry about it if I don't find myself getting thirsty during that time. But if I do get thirsty, absolutely, I'll provide my body with hydration that is asking for. But you guys have to understand that we really have to get out of this mindset of our body doesn't know best and we need to tell our body what to do. We need to fit it into this mold. We need to tell it what to do. Obviously, you shouldn't be dehydrated and you shouldn't be like, oh, drinking water is not important anymore. I don't need to drink it. I'm not saying that either. I think there's a fine line. You don't need to be like chugging gallons of water when you're not thirsty. So I don't really necessarily say a minimum amount of water. Some days I find myself drinking, 80 ounces. Sometimes I find myself drinking a scant 30 ounces. It really depends on the amount of exercise you do, how much sweat you produce, how much thinking you do. There's so many things, but you don't want to, peeing more than 6 times per day, you guys, is not a good thing. You don't want to be just constantly peeing out all your minerals. That's not a great thing that's happening. So we need to get over this idea that, we need to just flush our body out. It's good to be drinking plenty of water when you are on like a detox or something like that. You don't ever want to be getting a headache or anything like that. So there is a fine line, but I wouldn't go all day without drinking water either, because a lot of people have learned to kind of desensitize themselves to their body's signals as well. So they don't really think of like, oh, I'm at the beginning stages of being thirsty right now, I should drink some water. They like wait until they get to the part where they're like, I'm parched, and they like have to chug a bunch of water. So, I hate giving like rules, because this is where like we start to override our body for, a rule. So I think it's good to drink when thirsty. I wouldn't drink nothing at all. I would drink, I don't know. I don't really want to give you like an amount to drink, because it's going to be different for everybody depending on like your hormonal structure, where you are. If water makes you cold too, like if you drink water and it makes your temps go down, that shows you you're not doing really well on it. So in that case, you would want to drink plenty of broths. Like you never want to be feeling thirsty. You always want to feel hydrated. But a lot of people, what they do is they drink a bunch of water and they actually feel more thirsty. It's like the water doesn't give them the hydration that they need. So I would stick to a moderate amount, and you should never feel thirsty. I went back to paleo from keto and broke out really badly and retained a lot of water. Why is this happening? Unfortunately, when you're on keto, you guys, your gut bacteria changes and shifts, usually bad. I run GI maps a lot on people that have been on high-fat diets, and their bacteroidetes to firmicutes ratio really shifts. And pretty much the bacteroidite and firmicute ratio is the ratio of gut bacteria that you mostly have. So those bacteria make over 95% of the bacteria in your gut, and they should be in a specific ratio. You want one higher than the other. A lot of times on high-fat diets, unfortunately, the firmicutes gets out of balance and becomes higher. And so what happens is your gut bacteria has really starved. Some of them have actually starved. They've died. You don't use it, you lose it. You don't feed them, they pass away. Your body's not going to sustain a bacteria that is not getting fed or has no purpose. And so, the longer you go on keto, unfortunately, the harder it is to get your digestion back. And that's why a lot of people see benefit on keto. Like they think that it's because, oh, I'm not eating any carbs. The carbs must be the thing that's bad. No. What you have to understand is when you cut out carbs, you're cutting out certain specific starches that feed specific bacteria in your gut. And the bacteria in your gut are what is causing the problem in your body, and also causing the problem when you go to digest those things again, because when you eat those things, you're feeding them. So it's bringing up an old problem that was there all along. You just weren't feeding those bacteria, and so you weren't seeing the problem when you were on keto. Doesn't mean it wasn't there. That's why I always say, like, keto is a symptom suppressing diet. It's not necessarily a healing diet, because the minute you go back to eating normally again, your blood sugar skyrockets and your bacteria in your gut are freaked out. So I would recommend like some general bacteria bacteria killing herbs. I really like oregano or an oregano oil. There's one called FC Cytal by Douglas Labs, or Biotics Research, I should say. FC Cytal, you can find that on Amazon. There's another one called Dysbiocide. So you might have to do some actual gut work, and you're probably going to have a hard time digesting starches for a while, because you lose that ability the longer you are on a low carb diet. I ovulated super late on fertility meds, which caused a super short luteal phase. First month off them, and I ovulated on cycle day 14. Is this normal? Is my body finally regulating? Yeah, I mean, remember you guys, it takes, from the time that you change your diet, I really recommend people at least give it 8 months to a year to start getting pregnant, if you can wait that long. It's so important to make sure that your body has gone through what I call the 100-day wait. You want to have gone through at least 3 100-day waits. What that means is 100 days ago is what you're experiencing now. So that's why stress catches up to you later. That's why people are like, wait, why is my hair falling out? And I'm like, well, were you stressed 3 months ago? And they're like, well, yeah, I was really stressed 3 months ago. I was moving. And I'm like, because at that time, that was when a dormant follicle in your ovary was being activated and was starting to make that journey all the way towards ovulation. It takes 100 days. And so your health during that 100-day period will affect that egg when you actually go to ovulate. And so it's so important when you are on a fertility journey to really be real with yourself when you made those changes. When did you actually really start to change your lifestyle and change your diet? And then you have to give it time. And so, the fertility drugs can sometimes, when people are on them, it stresses them out. And then when they go off of them, their bodies are like, thank God that I don't have to process that shit anymore. So, sometimes fertility drugs do more harm than good. They don't really do anything good for a woman who is trying to have a baby. So sometimes actually coming off of them can be the best thing for the body. And I'm not saying always. I know wonderful children have been produced due to those fertility drugs, but your body's speaking to you, and it sounds like it's saying that it likes you to not be on those drugs. Do hormones, and I was going to say too that your work is paying off, right? You've been working hard, you've been being consistent, you've been taking care of yourself, and now you've done that final aspect of taking the stress off your body. And so of course it's regulating. You just had to trust the process and give it time. It takes time. Do hormones contribute to dermatoid cysts on the ovary? After having one removed in October 2015, I was told it was genetic, and boom, after removal, got pregnant. Things that make you go, I would assume that hormones play a role. I'm not really sure about dermatoid cysts. I do know that ovarian cysts, I don't know if they're the same thing. Like, I'm not really sure if ovarian cysts are called dermatoid cysts by some specialists. I'm not sure. But, almost always estrogen plays a role in cyst production, but that's just one role it's playing. What happens, you guys, you have to understand that your reproductive system, like your uterus and your ovaries, are very, very sensitive to estrogen. And when there's too much estrogen, remember, estrogen is pro-inflammatory. And when there's too much estrogen, the ovarian follicles are affected, the uterine lining is affected, and certain ovarian follicles can actually get inflamed, right? They can get inflamed, they can get angry, they can fill with fluid, infected, and therefore cysts are born. But yeah, I think it does have a hormonal aspect. I'm not saying hormones completely drive it. I'm sure it does. Remember that detoxification is genetic. Metabolism is genetic. And those two things affect how you are going to detoxify estrogens. And if you can't detoxify those things well, then, you'll absolutely get things like cysts and other things. Ooh, my assistant is here, and she's in Europe right now. I miss you, Rebecca. What's your preferred coffee company? Avoiding pesticides, etc. I just always shoot for organic. This one is just the one that they sell at Costco. For a while, I think they were just selling like a Jose's organic, and then now they are back to this one like desert rainforest. But I know that a lot of Costco's have seasonal or more like local items to them, so I'm not sure if that's sold in every Costco across the country. But I just stick to organic, and that's pretty much all I try to do. There are some, like I like Kicking Horse Coffee Company and certain coffees, but you don't have to buy like the most expensive coffee in order to have a coffee that you can enjoy. Just stick to one that's organic and sprayed with less pesticides. I feel terrible drinking hot coffee, but feel great with iced coffee. Do you know why? No, I'm not really actually sure why. I know that cold coffee is less acidic, so maybe that could be why. Any frequently overlooked causes of tinnitus, the ringing in the ears? Yes, B vitamins, B1, B2, B3. Usually a deficiency in those will give you absolute ringing in the ears. Can you explain endometriosis? I swell with water terribly before, during I ovulate, and again during period. Looking for why this may happen. Doctor doesn't know. Okay, so, when it comes to endometriosis, the first thing you have to understand is that the medical field isn't really sure what drives it yet. So if a doctor comes out and acts like they know exactly what endometriosis is, then that's your first red flag, because they think it might be autoimmune, they think it might be a bacterial infection, and they think it might be something else, but they're not sure, right? So okay, that's your first cue, is okay, something wacky is going on. But you have to look at the name, endometriosis. And so there is evidence that when you go on an antibacterial when you have endometriosis, something as simple as berberine, it helps. So that to me just shows that it does have a bacterial component, and I know that bacteria in the gut produce something called endotoxins. Endometriosis. So when I see someone with endometriosis, I immediately start working on their gut. I immediately start working on bacterial balance, and I immediately start working on inflammation and prostaglandin reduction. A lot of times when you have edema or bloating, or you retain water, your hormones are shifting, right? Minerals are needed. A lot of times people that struggle with severe water retention or edema, there's a few things going on. One could be aldosterone is high. That's a hormone that is partly responsible for retaining sodium. Now, but why is it high? Well, your body needs some sodium or some potassium or some magnesium or some calcium. So those are 4 minerals that you should really, really focus on, making sure you're getting plenty of all month long, and see if that helps with the bloating. The second thing is going to be progesterone. Unfortunately, if you're not making enough progesterone when you ovulate, you are going to be bloated, because progesterone is a diuretic. And so a lot of women with endometriosis are not making enough progesterone because their body's so inflamed. Their body's going through nutrients very quickly. Their body's under a lot of stress. And so there's not enough progesterone there. And another thing that I really I noticed is that prostaglandins are high. And this is not me really recommending this, but if I had endometriosis personally, I would be taking a baby aspirin every day, because aspirin is acetylsalicylic acid, and it actually lowers prostaglandin production. Prostaglandins are they're present throughout the whole body. They're actually what's responsible for making your the uterine lining, or the uterine muscles contract. They make things contract. They can actually make your digestive system contract too. That's why you get diarrhea sometimes when you're on your period. But they can be present throughout the whole body, and prostaglandins drive inflammation. Prostaglandins are made out of polyunsaturated fats. A lot of people will say that omega-3s block prostaglandin production, but that's not actually true. I know Dr. Jolene Brighton talks about that a lot, and that's not actually true, because omega-3s are a polyunsaturated fat. And so actually why that is because So it's hard to explain, but polyunsaturated fats make prostaglandins, and the omega-3 polyunsaturated fats actually kind of slightly block them from being produced, but they don't actually block them from being produced. They're still the building blocks for making prostaglandins, or these pro-inflammatory muscle contractors. So I really recommend being very careful about your polyunsaturated fat intake and really focusing on saturated fats to lower inflammation. And then I would consider, or at least look into, maybe using some aspirin to see if that will help lower prostaglandins and lower inflammation. But bacterial balance is where it's at, really, with endometriosis. It's one of those things where you really got to get your gut under control and get your liver detoxing properly. Because there's, it's you don't really understand why, we don't really understand why the body is building all this tissue, why it's doing that. Hi, any suggestions for food on the go or in a cooler for like a home or picnic? Seems like every go food is loaded with nuts or artificial ingredients. Yeah, isn't that interesting? So you always want to think of fast food that is natural fast food. So fruit is the ultimate fast food, right? You can just throw some fruit into a bag and go. That's my first go-to carbohydrate. For proteins, I always do Epic bars or like grass-fed beef sticks, healthy Slim Jims, whatever. And then hard-boiled eggs. That's easy. You could also do like beef jerky, but that's what I really stick to when I'm like on the go and I just need something quick. I'm trying to think of what else I do. I usually just do those. Like, I am not really that picky about it. I'll do like carrots and hummus or carrots and guacamole, like that kind of thing. But yeah, I just try to keep it really simple, and I think that fruit's really easy to bring with you. And then obviously if you're like doing like a meal, then you would just pack it, whatever meal you're taking, in like a little Tupperware container with a clip top. Doctor refuses to run more than TSH-T4 and anti-TPO. Could I still be having a thyroid issue? Yeah, unfortunately you have to get T3 tested. But if your doctor won't run those things, that's why pulse and temperatures come in handy. Just measure your temperature when you wake up in the morning and see where you're at. If you're regularly below 97.8, then you know for sure that your thyroid is under functioning. Also saw an RE yesterday, and they want to do an HSG and a sono something and this exploratory surgery to make sure I don't have polyps. Any thoughts on this? It seems super aggressive to me. Yeah, so when you guys have to understand that when doctors get to their end of their rope with helping you with fertility, because they don't see it as a whole body issue, they see it as a concentrated issue. It's a fertility issue. Not thinking like, well, a woman's fertility is really based on a woman's overall health. They'll start to get very exploratory. They'll start to get, I've seen people actually get ovarian tap procedure that actually pierce a hole in your ovary to get you ovulating again. I mean, this stuff is barbaric to me. Look at it. Take it from a third-party perspective. Pretend you were visiting here on planet Earth and you saw, humans that couldn't reproduce, and then you saw what doctors were doing, and think about how you would perceive that. Like, that's barbaric to me. But alas, it's the medical field. So, trust your gut in situations like that. Understand, really look at it realistically, how long it's been since you've really changed your life and your diet, and just, give it some time, give it some consistency before you start just going after every single thing. Because what if these procedures come back with absolutely no answers? Or what if they do? What are you going to do about it? You have to ask that question. Like, okay, if you do find polyps, what's going to be your plan of action? I've had people that go in for a surgery like that, and they come out of a surgery like that with no more uterus and no more ovaries. So you really need to make sure when you sign those papers and you go in for a surgery like that, you're not signing that they can take out whatever they want to, because a lot of times you are signing that, and you need to really make sure that they're not going to come out with any reproductive organs. Congrats on 10,000 followers. Oh, thank you. I'm actually really excited about it, to use the swipe up feature. Hi DHEA, low cortisol. As I've made a shift in my eating and supplementation with melatonin and licorice root, I'm running hot mid-afternoon and in the middle of the night. What could this indicate? Yeah, how long have you been taking licorice root? Because you really shouldn't take licorice root for any longer than 6 weeks. And it's so not good to take if you have never tested your diurnal cortisol rhythm, or, your morning, noon, afternoon, night cortisol. If you don't know where you're at, taking licorice can actually drive your stress hormones through the roof. And that's what we actually give licorice for, is for low cortisol. But you really truly have to make sure the client has low cortisol before you give them licorice root, or it can give them high blood pressure, and it can give them actual high cortisol. So I never recommend licorice root. I never think it's a good idea. Even when someone has low cortisol, I'll do everything I possibly can before I recommend licorice root, because it's just too risky of a supplement. But yeah, I would probably step back from the licorice root and see if that helps. Quit dairy in November along a lifestyle change, and my skin cleared up and lost some weight in the beginning. Trying to tie it back in, but it's breaking me out. Why is this, and how to tie it back? So the three main reasons why people can't digest dairy is because they have small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, meaning you have bacteria where it doesn't belong. You have low progesterone, which affects your ability to create lactase enzymes, or you have hypothyroidism, meaning that things are moving too slowly throughout the gut. Most people can digest dairy fine if they had a healthy body. The only people are that don't tend to digest dairy well for whatever reason, mostly because just their ancestors didn't really adapt well to eating dairy, are people of Asian descent, just because there wasn't a lot of cows available, for a very long time, and so your ancestors probably wouldn't have been eating a lot of dairy products. And then sometimes people of Native American descent also do not digest dairy very well, but everyone else has the capacity to do so. But you always have to remember, it's not the dairy's fault usually, it's usually the body's fault and whatever hasn't been healed. And I'm not saying a lot of people take, things so black and white. And whenever I say I consume dairy, that doesn't mean you must consume dairy. Some people don't do well with dairy for a really long time until they heal their gut. I didn't consume dairy for 3 or 4 years. So that might have contributed to me being able to digest it just fine. So, you have to do what's right for you. Also, remember with dairy, you have to make sure it doesn't have any additives like gums, guar gum, carrageenan, locust bean gum. Anything to put in to thicken it is going to irritate your digestive tract, as well as synthetic vitamins like vitamin A and vitamin D that they usually put into the milk. So you have to make sure it's just the dairy before you blame the dairy. And then you might just not be able to digest it well. Also, when you reintroduce it after a very long time, remember, you don't use it, you lose it. It does take about 3 weeks to restore your ability to make lactase enzymes. Until you restore that, I don't really recommend going crazy with dairy. I recommend doing 2 to 4 ounces of straight milk when you eat your lunch to get your body used to eating dairy again. When you start to implement things like cheeses and yogurts and cottage cheese and Greek yogurt without even just letting your body readjust to digesting milk, then, you're probably going to have a problem. Excuse me. I got Ancient Minerals magnesium oil to use before bed and on sore muscles, but I noticed that when I spray it on my back, I have a breakout. Have you noticed this before? Usually it helps with skin integrity, but it could be the oil that it's carried in. Also, you can just kind of mix it with a different oil or shea butter and see if that helps. But no, I've actually never seen that before. I'm wondering if it's the oil that they put theirs in. I can't remember what Ancient Minerals uses. I had one ovulatory cycle that I know of since diagnosed with PCOS in November. On day 54 now, and I feel helpless. I made a lifestyle change, but it's been stalling. What steps should I take? In this situation, or with the question that you're asking, this is one of those things where I have to look at someone's whole picture, and what that allows me to figure out what could be stressing the body out. It could be a number of things. It could be a million things. The problem with all of the information for PCOS online today is that they make women feel like things that are important but not that important are the most important thing. And so when they cut those out, they expect these amazing results, not realizing that it's a lot more complicated than that, unfortunately. And there's also just so much misinformation on online and on Instagram. I work with quite a few PCOS nutritionist as my clients, and so like I want you guys to remember that most of these people that are spouting like health information are also like struggling with health issues, which makes me feel a little bit odd about them talking about something that is not even working for them. So just you're gonna still have to do some digging. Healing is a process. It's not something that's just very simple. You do need to make sure you're eating nutrient dense, not just cutting things out, but tying the right things in. You also need to make sure you're sleeping well, you're not over-exercising that much, you have eliminated chemicals from your environment, from your hygiene products and your cleaning products. Remember, using a cleaning product that has chemicals in it is as bad as smoking 20 cigarettes in one sitting. So you have to make sure that your environment is set up for healing as well. You're not just saying like, well, I changed my diet, I'm expecting things to happen. Remember, these things are like death by 1,000 cuts. Each stress is a cut, and each stressor needs to be taken away. So, removing inflammatory foods is just one stressor taken away, but then you have to make sure that you're implementing nutrient-dense foods so you don't cause a nutrient deficiency. Then you got to make sure you're not, bathing in chemicals and drinking chemicals and breathing chemicals and, cleaning everything that you touch in chemicals. So, these things take time and they take steps, and just hang in there. And it does take time. It really does. How can I know for sure that I'm insulin resistant? Glucose and insulin levels are normal, and checking after and before meals as well. Could OGGT be showing otherwise? Getting it done next week. If your insulin levels are normal and your glucose levels are normal, you're not insulin resistant. Stop worrying about you being insulin resistant. Look to other factors. A lot of women are like, I'm not insulin resistant, but I have signs of, just don't worry about it. If you're not, move on. There's other issues at play. There's stress at play. There's probably hypothyroidism at play, adrenal issues. Like you need to move on and look to other issues. The biggest things that drive PCOS is estrogen dominance, or not having enough progesterone in relationship to estrogen. Hypothyroidism or subclinical thyroid function, and adrenal issues or high stress hormones like prolactin, cortisol, adrenaline, that kind of thing. Will you share all your last lives? I love to watch them all. Yes, I put them on my YouTube channel last night for you guys. So go search Jessica Ash Wellness on YouTube, and all the lives from the past month are up there, and I will now keep that up. So every live that I do from now on will be uploaded onto YouTube. Do you recommend to tie back dairy and sugar? What if it's affecting me badly? Brain fog, fatigue, and skin breaking out. Absolutely, you guys. You need to listen to your body. What I say is what I do, and when it comes to working with my clients, I'm helping them work this out. If my client is not reacting to dairy and sugar well, we cut it out and we do a gut cleanse. We get everything, working properly. And you can't focus on specific foods. You need to focus on overall balance. You need to be having protein, carb, and fat at every single meal. Every single snack needs to be balanced. You need to make sure you're getting your protein from bioavailable sources, not plants, because you cannot absorb protein from plants. It's very difficult. You need to make sure you're getting, protein from broths and collagen and gelatin, so your body can have the components it needs to heal. And then your carbs are coming mostly from roots and fruits. If you're metabolically impaired, you're not going to be able to handle sugar from anything but a fruit, probably. And maybe some dairy if you can tolerate it. But if you can't tolerate dairy, then you need to keep it out for a while and continue to do your healing work. That shows if you can't tolerate it, you still haven't gotten there yet. You just got to keep going. But a lot of people think that just removing something is going to do the job. And that's unfortunately not the case. I had an ultrasound recently to check on some stomach pain I was having, and they noticed a ruptured cyst on my ovary. I have PCOS. What does this mean? So remember that polycystic ovarian syndrome has nothing to do with your ovaries, even though it sounds like it does. The only reason they call it PCOS is because when they do an ultrasound, it shows that you have many or poly follicles, aka called cysts in the medical literature. So many follicle ovarian syndrome. And the reason that many follicles show up on your ovaries is because when you don't ovulate, you have multiple follicles racing for that finish line, because only one follicle will make it to ovulation. But in the meantime, you have about 8 to 12 usually racing towards ovulation. And so when you get those poly or many cysts or follicles on that ultrasound that shows you that you're not ovulating. That's all it shows you. That's all polycystic ovarian syndrome shows you, is that you're not ovulating. And that is what you should really think of PCOS as. It's an anovulatory problem. It's why am I not ovulating? There's too many stressors in the way for my body to ovulate, so I need to remove those stressors. Ovarian cysts, on the other hand, are a completely different thing. They're completely different phenomenons. Even though they sound similar, I know they do. The words are so confusing, you guys. They're completely different. An ovarian cyst is actual one follicle that has gotten blown up and has gotten inflamed and infected and full of fluid, and then sometimes can cyst or can rupture. And so that is a whole different situation, and that is usually driven by estrogen dominance, which unfortunately is what happens when you have PCOS. You tend to have, PCOS is driven by estrogen dominance, and so of course you're going to have some women with PCOS also struggle with ovarian cysts. It's an estrogen problem. You got to make sure you're detoxing, got to make sure that you're having a bowel movement once or twice a day, getting that estrogen out of your body, got to make sure your bacteria balance is good so those bacteria are not reactivating estrogens in the gut, and you've got to make sure that you're eating really well, giving your body the nutrients it needs, that kind of thing. So yeah, ovarian cysts are usually an estrogen problem, and that just shows that either progesterone is low, you're not detoxifying, or both. I just got a thyroid panel done. My TPO, free T3, and free T4 are in normal ranges, but my TSH is high. What's going on? Yeah, so, you know, it's so funny because people are like, oh, my stuff's in the normal range. And I'm like, I don't care about normal ranges, you guys. Symptoms are what matters, and temperatures are what matters when it comes to thyroid issues. Thyroid tests are a barbaric way to diagnose thyroid conditions, and they very many times go under the radar because doctors are simply using tests. Doctors 30 years ago would never use a test. They would always use the warmth of your hands and feet, temperature, pulse, that kind of thing. Very rarely would just use a test. So, you know, if your TSH is high, remember TSH is a stress hormone. It's not a thyroid hormone. It's your brain telling your thyroid, we're under stress. You need to pump out more T4. That is a stress signal. And so if TSH is above 2, it should optimally be between 1 and 2. Usually high TSH is diagnosed as hypothyroidism, but yeah, that shows you that your body is under a lot of stress if your TSH is above 2. I'm at the end of uni and having been in some future-related stress lately. Could this be stopping my hormone healing? Absolutely. Stress is the driver of hormonal imbalance. I don't care what you do with your diet, your supplementation, everything. Like, you could be sleeping perfectly, eating perfectly, drinking water perfectly, exercising perfectly, but if you're stressed out, you could literally be like, your health could be in a hole. So I always say that stress comes first, you guys, and if you're stressed out, you're gonna see that your healing is very, very slow. Is it healthier to eat what your body is craving rather than stressing about not having to eat certain foods if stress is your main issue, as long as you're eating whole foods mainly? Absolutely, you guys. So this is why I really just preach, like, food is important, but it is not everything. And we live in this culture where people are very hyper obsessed with their food. They've almost made it their religion, right? Like, I've seen people that have a bio that's like gluten-free, dairy-free, corn-free, egg-free, soy-free. And I'm like, I don't know what kind of life you're living, but if you have to define yourself by the food you don't eat, there's a problem. Like, that's a problem, you know? Like, there's something very wrong about that. And I don't know why people don't see that. So yes, you should absolutely eat foods that you crave, because that is your body's compass for telling you what it needs. Cravings are a biological signal to tell you what your body needs to eat, like literal nutrients it's trying to consume and get you to consume. And when we restrict, or when we don't listen to those cravings, this is where, you know, we have this term called binging in our society for this, but I don't think it's a binge. I think it's your body's like finally like, well, gotta override the brain, we gotta get what we need. And so when you find yourself uncontrollably, you know, eating a whole bag of chips because your body was craving salt all week and you said, no, you can't have that, no, you can't have that, no, you can't have that, and now you just are, you know, elbows deep in a bag of Lay's. Of course you are. Like, why are you surprised? So eat what you crave, eat what you enjoy. Stop worrying about if you didn't eat greens all week because you didn't want them. It's okay. It's all gonna be okay. You lived, right? You didn't die? Okay, we're good. So you guys gotta stop stressing about the food. gotta stop stressing about the food. If food is stressing you out, you need to relax the grip. Relax the grip on the food. Enjoy what you want to enjoy. Stop stressing about what so-and-so said or so-and-so said. I mean, all week I've literally eaten like Greek yogurt and papaya for 2 meals a day because that sounds good to me. And I don't care. I don't worry about, oh my gosh, is this balanced? Like, oh my gosh, what about my green intake? Oh my gosh, like, what the heck? Like, live your life a little bit. Gosh, like, people are getting by eating Pringles and they're alive. So I think I'll be okay. It's like the more we obsess about the food, and I understand, you guys, it's a very difficult place to be when you are struggling with your health. You feel like the harder you restrict, the better things will be. That's what we convince ourselves in our mind. Like, maybe we should just restrict a little bit harder, right? Maybe that's the answer. And so we remove another food, and then we remove another food, and we're like, if we just restrict a little harder, right? If we just punish ourselves a little more. But you have to understand that that's a pre-programmed thing into our head, that to be healthy, you must restrict. You must do things that your body doesn't want to do. That's not true. And so you need to get out of that mindset, give your body what it needs for maybe the first time in a lifetime, and just lean in. Your body's really wise, you guys. And if you actually like get outside and let it get adjusted to the seasons and enjoy nature, your body will really start to get in tune. It will get into a rhythm and a pattern, and it will crave things based on the season. It will crave things that are in season. And you're gonna just not have as much stress around food. When you learn to really trust your body and give yourself permission to trust your body, you will feel a lot more freedom around food. How do I ask for blood tests that my doctor doesn't want to run? E.g., she says, inflammation has nothing to do with PCOS and that my white blood cells are normal, so I shouldn't worry. You should maybe try to look for a new doctor, or you should demand her. There is a point, like, of course you want to be nice with your doctor, you want to have a good relationship with them, you want to trust them, but if they're not your advocate and they're fighting you, they're not on your team. No. That's not being a team member. And they're supposed to be on your side. They work for you. Do you not recall that you pay them, you pay insurance, and insurance pays them? And so they work for you, right? That's the nature of that relationship. And so it's so funny to me when doctors deny tests to me. I'm like, wait a minute, like, don't I pay you? Like, wait, what? Like, I pay you, you're my partner, you're not actually my partner, you're paid by me. Like, they act like you work for them. I'm like, wait, what? This is my body. So, if your doctor is not being helpful with you, you don't have to be like, peace out, bitch, but you kind of should. But you definitely should look for a doctor that's going to be on your team. And sometimes it takes, it's hard. It's annoying. You have to go through multiple doctors before you find a doctor that you trust. I probably have gone through a dozen doctors in my lifetime or more. And I've finally found one that I can go to her and she will run anything on me. She will tell me like, yeah, sure, no problem. Because she understands, we understand the relationship. She understands that she's there to help me with my health and to get better, not to, order me around and stroke her little ego. And that's what, unfortunately, a lot of doctors, they have big egos and they don't like when people, insult their intelligence. We can call it that. Magnesium is a little low and sodium is in the low ranges too. I take magnesium daily and eat salt. Could this cause a problem? Oh, absolutely. Low magnesium and low salt is awful for you. Your body is so stressed out when you're low in minerals. Your stress hormones are shooting through the roof usually when you're low in sodium and magnesium. So you might not be retaining it well. I would definitely look into a thyroid issue for sure. How do I know that I'm inflamed? Inflammation, usually, just the one inflammation test that you can do is when you wake up in the morning, you test your grip strength, squeeze as hard as you can, notice how you feel. If you can't squeeze very hard, if your grip strength is low, that's an immediate sign that you're probably inflamed. If you have joint pain, if you have digestive issues, if you have skin issues, skin rashes, acne, anything like that, anything inflamed, you guys, so red, puffy, irritated, all of those things, that's what inflammation is. It's just a response to irritation in the body. So, anything that looks inflamed is inflamed. Do hormones contribute to dermatoid cysts on the ovary? I already answered this question. Would you share your opinion on what causes Alzheimer's, as I've seen loads of type 3 diabetes, but I'm not sure it makes sense. Just curious. I know it's a touchy subject. Yeah, so, all these people starting to say that it's a type 3 diabetes, like, I would believe it. I absolutely would. But we know diabetes isn't caused by sugar. That is something that's known in the scientific community. So if we call it type 3 diabetes, and we know that diabetes is caused by free fatty acids going around in the bloodstream, and polyunsaturated fats damage the brain, maybe it is type 3 diabetes. But we know that type 2 diabetes and type 3 diabetes, or at least insulin resistance, is not caused by sugar. It's caused by an inability to process sugar due to the cells actually being inflamed and not being able to process glucose, which is a very powerful fuel, or the fact that your body has become so metabolically damaged that it has started to burn free fatty acids. Remember that the brain prefers to burn glucose. It needs to burn glucose to work properly. That is the one organ in your body that must burn glucose to work properly. Must. The minute that those cells in the brain start to be forced to burn free fatty acids is the minute your brain starts to go. So think of it that way. What causes skin to be super oily? Usually hyperlactin. Hyperlactin, high testosterone can, high stress levels, but usually it's high prolactin that is super makes the skin very oily. And yeah, lowering stress can be very, very helpful. Getting your skin regulated, just the health of your skin in general regulated. But yeah, it can be usually due to a stress issue. Sorry, I was distracted for a second. Any tips for sleep apnea? Yeah, make sure you're breathing through your nose, which you probably aren't. You're probably a mouth breather. So I would look into something called Somnifix. It's a sleep tape. It sounds scary. It's not that scary. It's like a little sleep tape that you put on your mouth, and it has a little slit in it, and it's meant to keep your mouth closed so it forces you to breathe through your nose. And that could really help with sleep issues. Yeah, if your scalp, because Sophie asked, and how can I control it? So if your scalp's really, really oily, just look at it as a systemic issue. It's not necessarily like you need to control your scalp issue. You need to control the health of your scalp. Also, if you're using shampoos that have waxes in them or are really stripping your hair of the natural oils, your body actually has to make more oil to protect the scalp. So, there's so many different reasons why your scalp could be oily, but progesterone really helps with that. So you want to make sure you're ovulating, and you want to make sure that you're making enough progesterone when you ovulate, because progesterone really is anti-estrogenic, and it's also anti-androgenic, and so it can really help lower stress on the body. But I really noticed that once I was making enough progesterone or taking progesterone, my scalp was a lot less oily. And the more stress I'm under, I do notice the more stress I'm under, the more oily my scalp is. It's really interesting. Thoughts on spironolactone for cystic acne? From my opinion, spironolactone can mess with your cycles quite a bit. It can actually stop you from ovulating in some cases, so it is important to make sure it's not doing that, because that would really defeat the purpose. And in some women, it can really cause issues. In some women, it doesn't cause a lot. It really depends on the dosage. But a lot of times in my practice, what I see is women go on spironolactone for acne, and then it doesn't fix the problem. So, what are you going to do? Are you going to be on a medication forever for acne? Okay, then make that decision, but you need to make sure that's an informed decision, and you read through that pamphlet, because you need to know those side effects. Spironolactone does not come without side effects. And if you're not going to be on the spironolactone forever, so what are you going to do when you get off of it and acne comes right back? Because it was just a Band-Aid. So you just have to ask yourself those questions. It's a pro and con situation. There's no right answer. It's more what works for you. Some people are so desperate and so are not confident because of their skin. They want to go on the medication for a little while. That's fine, do you. But just understand that it doesn't fix the issue. It just puts a Band-Aid on the issue. Can you explain the deal with sugar and PCOS and dairy with PCOS? I'm really confused. Thank you so much for all your time. You're absolutely amazing. Yeah, so, there's an idea that PCOS is driven by insulin resistance, or there's 4 types of PCOS, which I have come to find that that's not true. Now I've seen the light, and I've seen that PCOS is driven by 3 things: suboptimal thyroid function, stress issues, and inflammation in the body, due to usually gut issues. But that's caused by an imbalanced metabolism. When your metabolism is impaired, things are going to slowly move through the digestive tract, leading to rotting and fermenting. And so when your body is inflamed or not working properly, most women with PCOS have low progesterone, and so that is going to absolutely affect the way that you process dairy. You cannot process dairy when you have a hypothyroidism issue, when you have a low progesterone issue, because both of those things play a part in your ability to create enzymes that break down dairy. Remember, dairy has a very specific sugar called lactose, which is very liver supportive. But if you don't have the enzyme called lactase to break it down, or your body is impaired from making it, you cannot break down that lactose. And so therefore it causes problems. It causes you to not have good digestion. It can cause your skin to act up, that kind of thing. But all this weird information about like dairy being an IGF-1 producer, well, I'm like, so are carbohydrates, so is eating meat. So are you telling me that all animal products are wrong? Like, if someone tells you to not eat dairy because of IGF-1, then they need to be telling you not to eat carbs, not to eat meat either, because those also produce IGF-1. So that's out, that blah. And then another thing is that dairy is one of the most inflammatory foods. But then I always say, like, usually foods are blamed, and it's not the foods themselves, it's actually the body that's not able to digest them. So yes, it can be very pro-inflammatory in a body that can't already process it. And so sometimes it can really help to cut dairy out for a little while to give your body a break. But there's no reason to cut it out if when you cut it out, you don't see any benefit from it. Like, why? And when you cut out dairy, you need to make sure that you are replacing the calcium that you were getting from dairy. A lot of women are low in calcium and they don't realize it. And remember, you have to keep very tight calcium blood levels. You actually have a gland called the parathyroid gland that is, its only job is to regulate calcium blood levels. And when you're not intaking enough calcium, guess what will happen? That parathyroid gland has to raise something called parathyroid hormone, which is a stress hormone, and break down your bones for calcium. That's why your calcium levels will always be in the normal range, because your body will make calcium if you're not consuming it. But that hormone, parathyroid hormone, is stress hormone. It breaks down your tissues. It actually affects your hair too. So I see a lot of women who, you know, as long as you're replacing the calcium. It's very hard to get calcium from anything else, I'll be honest. You have to drink tons and tons of vegetable broth in order to get enough calcium, or do eggshell calcium. You are probably low in calcium. So that's why I really like to educate women about food, and I like to say, like, when you cut out dairy, it is a responsibility. You can't just cut out dairy and be like, okay, now I'm dairy free. Like, you have to replace the calcium that you're getting from dairy with something else. Then, you know, but a lot of people are right in the fact that when you cut out dairy, you're dealing with an inflammation problem. But you're not usually dealing with the problem. You're just taking away something that's making the problem worse. And that's the thing, is like, is the dairy causing the inflammation, or dairy making the inflammation worse? And then when it comes to sugar, so a lot of people think that it's a dysregulation of blood sugar that causes PCOS, which is absolutely true. But remember, like I said, the cells burn sugar for fuel. That is what they like to burn. So if you just restrict sugar, and I'm not talking about like cake, I'm talking about like fruit, and I'm talking about like, you know, honey, and I'm talking about like carbs, like, you know, starchy root vegetables and things. When you cut out sugar like that, you are forcing the cells to burn free fatty acids. The cells don't want to burn free fatty acids. They want to burn glucose, but they will burn free fatty acids if they have to. And that can lead to inflammation, that can lead to cellular breakdown, so many issues. And remember, the liver relies upon glucose in order to work properly, and you need to be detoxing that estrogen. So I recommend, that's why I always recommend, it's not so much about cutting certain foods as it is about balancing your blood sugar. Protein, carb, and fat 5 times a day. 5 small meals throughout the day. Protein, carb, and fat. Protein, carb, and fat. Protein, carb, and fat. Never forget that mantra, because protein, carb, and fat is going to be your life, okay? You can't consume sugar on its own when you have PCOS, that's for sure. I sent an email to be on your waiting list, but have never received anything back. How do we know if you're on your waiting list? Yeah, so the email, if you're using the support at Jessica Ash Wellness email, just give it a little bit of time. Just be patient. My assistant is on vacation right now until May 1st. And so one of her responsibilities is to answer those emails. And so if they're not urgent coming into that email inbox, I am checking them. But unfortunately, I'm just waiting for her to get back to reply to that. So if you send an email, just hang in there. You are on the waiting list. Just, it's going to take time. My waiting list is about 6 months right now. Please release your program. It's coming, you guys. I cannot rush it. And unfortunately, I work a 80-hour-a-week job on top of building a program. So it's just going to take time. DHEAS and test levels are high. LH and FSH ratio is 2-to-1 with PCOS. Changes in lifestyle in November made some progress, but it still started to stall. What could cause this and how to solve it? Stress. Stress. Hey, you look lovely. Oh, thank you. Which essential oils are good for PCOS and how to use it? Not a big fan of essential oils, you guys. It's nice to put them in a diffuser and sniff them. If you want to put them on your skin, you want to make sure they're really, really diluted, but you never want to take them internally. I'm not actually a big fan of essential oils just because most of the research that's coming out is they're powerful for sure. And I won't deny that. But that's the thing, is they are powerful and we don't really know how they're affecting. For example, lavender is very estrogenic and it can actually affect a male fetus from fully developing into a boy. So that shows you how powerful it is, how estrogenic it is. So, things like that, I'm just I get really nervous about, and we don't really know how powerful these plants are. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of research on it. So I just really urge you on the side of caution. And of course, we have doTERRA and Young Living and all these, essential oil experts that really know nothing about essential oils except for what they've been taught. And so that's who's a majority on Instagram educating you on the safety of essential oils. And I'm no. I usually get acne on my jawline and sometimes in my cheek, but it usually goes away, but it leaves back spots. So I have these acne spots all over my chin. Nothing seems to work. Suggestions. When your stress hormones are high, you'll find yourself healing slowly. Anything with sugar will speed up healing. So I recommend honey, raw honey, applied on your scars to really speed up healing. I also have an added question. I have pigmentation in my skin folds, especially on my neckline and armpit. Nothing works for this as well. Do you have information on these as well? Yeah, I talked about on my other live how any darkening of the skin is usually due to estrogen. So it's important to just making sure that you're actually getting estrogen out of the tissues and you're getting you're detoxifying estrogen. So your liver's working optimally, you have optimal progesterone so that you can actually get estrogen out of your tissues, because unfortunately estrogen can store in all of your tissues, including your skin, and it can affect pigmentation. We know that estrogen causes melasma, causes hyperpigmentation, things like that as well. Heard you say regular temps below 97.8 means you have a thyroid problem, so I went to check my morning temperatures. All my temps are below 97.8, except for the 2 weeks right after I ovulate. Yeah, so remember, progesterone stimulates thyroid function, and so sometimes women will have, they're in a slight hypothyroid state before they ovulate, and then progesterone gets them above. You really need to, if you're having morning readings below at a certain point, then you really want to make sure that you're after breakfast reading, about 40 minutes after. Take your temperature 40 minutes after breakfast and see where it's at, because sometimes your temp in the morning can be artificially raised due to stress hormones. And if you find that your temps are dropping after you eat instead of rising, so you would want, in a normal functioning metabolism, you want your temperatures to rise after you eat, which shows that your meal really contributed to proper metabolic function and encouraged your metabolism. When you see your temperatures drop after you eat, that shows that stress hormones were playing a role in your temperature, and eating actually lowered the stress in your body. So when you're wondering if you're having low metabolic function, you actually want to take that second reading or a temperature reading 40 minutes after a meal to see where you're actually at. I would keep an eye out for sure for just low metabolic function. If you suspect SIBO, what is the best way to gut cleanse or reset? Yeah, SIBO is definitely not just like a bullet point issue. It's a very complicated condition. But the biggest thing is we have to start tracking metabolic function first. That's what I have my clients do, is start tracking metabolic function first. Then sometimes I'll have you test it. Like I'll have you do a breath test if you are open to it, if you want to do that. If not, we just treat for it anyways. We start to work on migrating motor complex, getting motility going. I cut out all fibrous foods so we can start moving things through the gut tract quick, and then we start to kill bacteria. It's a very it's just a step-by-step process, but I really think that fibrous foods should be removed when you're trying to heal SIBO, because you got to get foods moving through the digestive tract quicker. And obviously I want you to be comfortable with what you're eating, and I'll let you kind of experiment with what works for you or not. But I find that a lot of people, when they're trying to heal SIBO, they just don't do well with like high fiber foods. Okay guys, so I see that I have a lot of questions left. I'm gonna go live again. It's been an hour, so Instagram's cutting me off, but just join me in the next live and we'll keep going. Just ask your questions again. See you in a sec.